What's going on, everyone? So the San Antonio Spurs and Malaki Branham kind of feel like this is the kind of curve in which you either go your separate ways or you end up becoming a real piece of the future for this organization, right? A lot of talks and murmurs that this is kind of, they're really kind of expecting and hoping that he can kind of take a bit of a leap, right? Obviously, he had a player or a team option this season. He has one next season, and they want to kind of see him start taking those next steps, kind of start taking those next strides for this team and organization. Now, he's still incredibly young. He's only 21 years old. Last season, he averaged 9.2 points, 2 rebounds, 2.1 assists, while shooting 43.2% overall from the field. If you look at his overall stat lines, last season he played 75 games total, 21 minutes per game, which, again, 43.2% from the field, 34.7% from three-point range, which isn't great, under 50% from two-point range at 49.4%, so he's right there at the cusp. Had an EFG of 50.6%, 87.3% from the foul line, but on very limited attempts, not even one attempt per game. Again, 2 rebounds, 2.1 assists, half steal, and then 9.2 points per game. Where if you look at his rookie season, 66 games, 23.5 minutes, 44% from the field, as well as 30.2% from three-point range, which again isn't good, but you see the strides from 30% to 35%, or just shy of 35% on similar attempts. He had 3.9 attempts in his rookie season, 3.6 attempts last season. So roughly the same attempts, but you see the strides in his shooting. And then again, 2-point percentage. He took more attempts from his rookie season at 5.4 compared to 4.8, but his shooting percentage also went down, which isn't good. And so he averaged 10.2 points his rookie season and 9.2 this year. Now, look, the Spurs are a team that are in a position to take their time in development, right? But you have Stephon Castle. You have, Devin Vassell, right? You have several other guys on this roster. And Chris Paul, how long is Chris Paul going to be around and on this team? Obviously this season, but, you got to imagine if it works, right? And I'm not even talking about works in the sense of them winning, 50 games or anything like that. I'm talking about in the sense of like him helping the development of Stephon Castle, of Devin Vassell, of these guards, Trey Jones, guys like that on this roster. Got to imagine that he sticks around, right? And you need to find minutes for Stephon Castle. Yes, he's supposed to be the point guard of the future, but him at 6'6", you can play him and slot him essentially 1 through 3. And, are you really going to play Malaki over Castle at the 2 at times, right? Because Malaki, he's 6'4", right? So he's best at the 2 guard. He's listed as a small forward shooting guard, but he is best with his just the way he plays the game at the shooting guard position. So he's a guy that, again, like, he's got to be competing with these other players on this roster, other players on this team, but particularly with Devin Vassell. Because Devin Vassell, he's going to get his, 30, 35 minutes a game. Stephon Castle, I imagine they're going to try to get him, maybe not early on, right? You even saw like with Wemby last season. It's like Wemby only played 19 minutes last night. Why is that? It's just because Pop's trying to let him ease into the game, right? Trying to get the understanding. And then you saw his minutes and production start to ramp up. I think you'll get a similar thing with Castle. I think, more likely than not, I think he'll probably come off the bench next season for most, if not all of the season. And, I wouldn't be shocked if he's getting like, 15-minute nights. And it's like, wow, like, what, they're really not playing Castle more? And it's just, and then as the season progresses, you'll see him getting more and more minutes. And then he'll eventually be a 25-minute a game guy, something like that. But, the Spurs, they're a young team that there aren't these expectations yet of winning a championship or, being one of the top teams, right? This in many ways is a development year. Yes, I believe that the Spurs want to win. Wemby definitely wants to win. I mean, he's made that clear. And look, I've made the argument that if I'm the Spurs, you almost are better off kind of pushing your chips in while you have Wemby so cheap, because eventually Wemby's going to get paid. And right now with the new CBA, right, it just makes things a lot more difficult. And Wemby being, on a rookie scale deal and being relatively cheap, especially for the talent. I mean, last year he was arguably a top 15 player in the league, right? If he starts moving into the top 10, I really do think you try to go make a big splash next season, right? Like if you can win a championship or two before Wemby ends up getting that inflated, that big contract, right? He's not going to get the $60 million or anything like that right out the gate, right? You got to go through the chain, right? But he's still going to get paid, and so at some point, do you kind of push your chips in, right? And then that's where a lot of these guys, like a Malaki, could end up being a bit of the odd man out, right? But he's also working against Blake Wesley, who he's 21 as well. And he's best as your kind of two guard. David Duke is another guy that basically best as a two guard, right? Like, didn't they bring in Malachi Flynn, right? They got Brandon Boston Jr., right? They have several guys that can easily kind of play that role, right? And you have Keldon Johnson as of now. Now, look, they have been trying to shop and move off of Keldon Johnson all off season, but he had a body transformation and working on his agility and stuff like that, right? Like he could end up being, in that conversation for sixth man of the year. So he may end up getting a majority of the shots off the bench, and Malaki could end up just being kind of the odd man out just by default, right? Like he might end up not being able to really show that progress in sides, right? Now defensively, I think he needs to pick it up a little bit, right? He has moments where he looks like he can be a really good quality defender, and then he has moments where he's just like constantly getting blown by and just not looking great. So if he can kind of find a little more consistency, then I do think that he has the potential to, find his spot, find his footing on this team as a legit two-way player. But more than anything, I think he's got to get his shooting percentages up. I'm not saying he has to be like 40, 45% this season or anything like that, but you saw the strides from year 1 to year 2, from 30% to, just under 35%. If he can get to like 37% this season, ideally 38% this season, then I think it'd be a tough argument to move off of him already, right? Especially compared to some of these other guys, right? So I think if you can get him kind of, focused, continuing to grow and develop, kind of show that like, no, he can start taking the next step. And when I mean by the next step, I don't mean, him moving into, starting level stuff, star status or anything. No, I'm talking about like, can he go from, kind of that like fringe, like, is he good enough? Is he not? To like, okay, he clearly belongs, to where you at least now start having to make arguments against it rather than arguments for it, right? Like right now you have to kind of talk yourself into Malaki, where if it's one of those things where that flips and it's like, man, you really got to start talking yourself out of him, right? Like, so then now you got to try to find, okay, well then who's next in the line, right? Are you moving off other guys? Are you looking at other guys, right? Like, but again, he has the luxury of this is a young team, and that he doesn't have to, like, there isn't this like insane pressure of like he has to be great right away, but you need to at least start seeing the strides being taken. You need to start seeing like, okay, you saw improvement in some areas from year 1 to year 2, but you also saw some slides from year 1 to year 2. And that's not what you want to see. You want to see clear progress in all areas, right? You don't want to see a guy, shoot the same or roughly the same attempts, but on a worse percentage, right? Like it's just like, especially from like 2-point range and stuff like that. Like the 3-point shot, it's like, okay, continue to improve. You see the growth and stuff, but to shoot sub 50% from 2-point range is not a good testament to his game, right? And I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive at times, right? I'd like to see him, within reason. Like, you need to let the game come to you, right? Don't try to force the issue. Don't try to, but, he can hoop. He's definitely a hooper. But, can he adjust and find his spot and his footing, especially on this team that they just have a lot of guards, or at least a lot of guys that can play in his position, right? So, he is a guy that also I see a lot of Spurs fans kind of split on at times. A lot of Spurs fans seem to love him and are like, yeah, hey, we need to keep this guy, right? He should be in the conversation as a piece for the future, not even necessarily starting, right? Because thing is, Devin Vassell is their guy at the 2. So chances are you're either playing to eventually get traded, right? To kind of be a starting 2 guard for another team, or you're playing to be the primary backup behind Devin Vassell. Unless one of these guys come along and are just clearly better than Vassell. Vassell's a guy that, he's still young enough and is still going to probably take some strides himself in his game, right? Like I've talked about, can Devin Vassell, can he kind of start getting into that 22, 24 range this season, which if that does happen, then, it makes it that much harder, right? So again, for a guy like Malaki, you're playing to either be the primary backup or you're playing to eventually get traded to a team that, sees you as their starting 2 of the future, and you kind of get that opportunity. But you need to show and at least be clearly good enough to be that backup. So where it's like, okay, example, James Harden, right? It's like, wow, this guy clearly is better than being the 6th man, right? Like, he should clearly be the star. And I'm not saying Malaki will become James Harden to that level, but I'm just an example that everyone would know, a name that everyone would know of, like, hey, he's coming off the bench, he worked his way, he showed, like, oh man, this guy is clearly capable of being a starter on another franchise. And then, of course, James Harden blossomed into a superstardom, one of the best players ever. And, Malaki is the same thing. Like, can he, not necessarily to the level of James Harden, but can he show, okay, like, he's clearly better. He should be starting somewhere, right? He should be starting on a team somewhere. Like, he's better than, the 8th man on the Spurs or whatever. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Are you a fan of Malaki? Do you think, he's probably going to be the odd man out at some point? It's just kind of a matter of time. They have too many other guys that kind of fill in the role that Branham plays. Are you rooting for him? What do you think his ceiling? What do you think his floor is? All those things, I'd love to hear. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.